Okay, today is Wednesday, October 26th, and the lab going to be looking at today and working through is a combination of IPv6 and IPv4 related, specifically backing up, I'm jumping around. The lab is looking at OSPFv2, which is for IPv4, and OSPFv3, which is for IPv6. And in this lab, we'll be looking at the OSPF configuration steps, verifying the configuration, and looking at some of the databases that are associated with OSPF and getting a sense of how to use those databases in troubleshooting. Specifically, we're talking about the Show IP OSPF neighbor database, the OSPF database, and the OSPF Show IP OSPF. So those three together is a lot of content that can come out of them, and using some extraction and connections, looking at the way the informations interrelate, can completely build a visual topological diagram of what the network looks like, especially from the OSPF database. So what I've done here, just go back real quick. This is again NGNS3, and rather than take the time, I've already set up the interfaces. So interfaces for router 1, router 2, router 3 are configured with an IPv4 address as well as an IPv6 link local address and an IPv6 global. So we'll take a look at those in just a moment. And then setting off over here is router 4. This router will not be participating in OSPF. So we're going to have some static routes between router 3 and router 4. And then we're going to be redistributing that static route from router 3 into the OSPF and see how that affects what that looks like in terms of looking at the database, the IP OSPF database. So go ahead and jump in and get started. So just do a quick verification here. Show IP interface brief. We'll take a look at the IPv4 addresses. So we have serial 10 and 1/0, which is the segment between router 1 and router 2. One thing I was going to say real quick, I'll hold it. It's about this connection here. All the labs that I look through start off and introduce engineers that are CCNA knowledge aware that are ready for the content at the CCNP level. They almost always start the OSPF discussion off with labs that are based on serial connections. And you're going to see that because this is a serial connection, there is a particular aspect of the Show IP OSPF database that is not present, and that lack of that presence for me threw me off, and it kept throwing me off until I realized I needed to add it in, and you'll see what I'm talking about really quickly here, because the actual configuration of OSPF is pretty straightforward. What we're going to do on router 1, I think I'll say we'll do it at the interface level. On router 2, between router 1 and router 2, we'll do it using the network statement. This is all in IPv4. And of course, in the IPv6 configuration that's all done at the network level, because as we'll see when we look at the subcommands for configuring IPv6v3, there is no network statement. Okay, so that's the IPv4 addresses on router 1. Let's do show IPv6 interface brief. And so we've got, those are the addresses that are link local and global address there for serial 1/0 as well as for loopback 0. Again, to do the same thing here, show IP interface brief. That always gets me. Okay, there's our IPv4 addresses on router 2 for the serial connections as well as for the loopback interface. Loopback interfaces in these cases are representing LAN subnets. And show IPv6 interface brief. Show IPv6 interface brief. Okay, and there we go in there. We've got serial 1/0, serial 1/1, and the loopback. Everything's in the up and up state there on router 2, up and up state on router 1. Let's take a router 3 real quick. Show IP interface brief. Up and up state for the IPv4 addresses, as well as up and up for the loopback 0. Show IPv6 interface brief. And looking good there on the IPv6 for the serial 1/0, which is going over to router 4, and the serial 1/1 going up to router 2, and the loopback 0. Everything's up and up. And last on the interface configuration, show IP interface brief. Router 4 up and up for the serial 1 as well as the loopback, and show IPv6 interface brief. And okay, serial 1/1, which is again going over to router 3. We're in the up down state, so let's fix that. That's the interface is shut down, whereas the loopback interface is up and up automatically. When a loopback interface is configured, it automatically goes into the up and up state. So let's go into interface serial 1/1 and say no shutdown. I go into the correct interface, show IPv6 interface brief. Now that's, okay, let me back up. If this interface is down, it should have been down for IPv4 also. Show IP interface brief. And it is. So, okay, I went into the wrong interface. Conf T interface serial 1/1. No shutdown. I'm not getting the echo message back that the protocol is going up, showing that the protocol is down. Do ping 192.168.77. Making sure. Yeah, everything's up and up on router 3. Okay, you know what? Just go into show IP in brief. And it is still showing the serial interface serial 1/1, say shutdown, do show run serial 1/1, do show run interface serial. Okay, the interface is up, so we'll say shut down and no shutdown. Okay, when I issued the shutdown, we got the administrative. This looks like this may have just been one of those moments with GNS3, and I've had that happen before, where an interface, even though the cabling in the diagram is active, and then even issuing the no shut command, the interface will stay down because I think the signaling or there's just a communication problem in GNS3. But now we're set. So we got on router 4, serial 1/1, which is going over to router 3, is now in the up and up state. Interesting, it just changed to down. Yeah, there's something going on. We're not going to get hung up on that because I think this is specifically a GNS3 apparition. If this were physical hard equipment, we would know that there was probably a problem with the line, with the cabling. Since this is all virtual, we're not going to get stuck here. We'll come back to this, and if need be, I'll go offline and work on it and come back. So we'll leave router 4 for now, because just to make sure. Yeah, it's showing the line protocol down. You know what I'm going to do? No, I'm going to stick to my word, which is to keep going, and I'll take care of that on offline. Okay, so we've got the interfaces configured. We have the IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. So what we're going to do is there's going to be a router, there's going to be an area 0, which is between router 2 and router 3. And an area 51 between router 2's serial 1/0 interface and router 1, which by that, since there are 2 areas, area 2 will be our area border router, and we can go ahead, and I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and jump in and we'll start. We can actually start on router 2. So go into global configuration mode, and we'll go into interface serial 1/1, and there we're going to say router OSPF. Oh, I'm still at the interface level. Exit router OSPF, and we're going to process ID 1. And then say router ID 3.3.3.3. Router ID is essential in OSPF, and by setting the ID, it makes it a value that is much easier for me to read when I'm looking at the database, neighbor, and IP OSPF data show IP OSPF in the process. By having that router ID, I know exactly which routers LSAs have contributed to the building of the database table. So let's see, we've done, that's router 3, and we're going to exit there, and then we'll say into interface serial 1/1 IP OSPF process is 1. So look at the commands here. A lot of them, it runs by real quick, but the very first one listed is for the process ID, and we use the process ID of 1. So we're going to say IP OSPF process ID of 1 area, and this is going to be for area 0. Okay, can back out of there. We're also going to put the I'm going to put the loopback interface loopback 0 into that same area. Okay, and I just used the up arrow and recall command to put that loopback interface into OSPF Area 0. Okay, so we can end there, and just to keep things moving so that I'm go ahead and write memory there. Oh, you know what I just realized? I just configured. No, we're good. So what I thought I had done was, in my mind, that I was configuring OSPF for IPv4 or OSPFv2, and that I was using the network statement. And I had, in my mind, I thought I was working on router 3, which would have been a slightly, just in my mind, it would have, I was thrown off, but I'm okay. So I won't have to dig too deep into the what I was thinking. I thought I was on the wrong router configuring, but I'm not. So global configuration, router, OSPF, using the same process ID, router ID, 3.3.3.3, exit, interface serial 1/1, and IP OSPF 1 area 0. I was expecting to see, there we go, okay. I did that intentionally, so I wanted this to come up. So I did use the incorrect router ID up on router 2. I called router 2 router 3. I gave it the router ID of 3.3.3. If we do show IP protocol, show IP protocol. You see that I gave this OSPF process 1, I gave it a process ID, a router ID of 3.3.3, and when I attempted to configure router 3, which should have that router ID 3.3.3, we've got a duplicate router ID neighbor. OSPF detected duplicate router ID of 3.3.3. So we'll leave it there. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the loopback interface into OSPF, that's area 0, but then I'll go back to router 2, router OSPF1, no router ID, and say router ID 2.2.2.2, and do a clear IP OSPF process to have that change take effect. Okay, there we go. So neighbor went down, and now we're loading to full, and show IP OSPF neighbor, and we have our neighbor there with the router ID of 3.3. State is full, priority 0, our dead time, the address of that interface on the other end of that segment 4.2, and the serial 1/1 interface. Now we come back over here to router 3, and again, when by changing that router ID up on router 2 and issuing the clear IP OSPF process, we reset the process and did not get a duplicate router ID message. We actually went completely with neighbor, going from loaded to full. So we've got, so if we do show IP OSPF neighbor, and there we go, we've got our neighbor at 2.2.2. So we're set on area 0 at the IPv4 level. So let's go and do the same thing for IPv6, which will be OSPFv3. So we'll just do it since we're already on router 3, and I'll keep my mind clear where I'm at. Go back into global configuration, and we say IPv6 and look at the commands that are after that. There it is. Okay. So it's OSPF router. And first you want to use the OSPF IPv6 OSPF command, but that's different. What we want at this point is we're enabling the router process, so it's enabling the IPv6 routing process. So we're going to say IPv6 router OSPF, and process ID, we'll give it a process ID of we could give it the same process ID, but I think for clarity we'll give it a process ID of 2. Okay, and then we're going to say IPv6 router ID 3.3.3.3, and now we can exit and we'll go under the interfaces, because I actually should go back in. There is no, if we were to look for a network statement as we can in IPv4, OSPFv2 for IPv4, there is no network statement. We go from log adjacency changes to max LSA. So in IPv6, the only place to enable IPv3 is the only place to enable OSPFv3 in IPv6 is under the interface. So we'll exit here and we'll go under interface serial 1/1, and the command is IP OSPF. And if we roll up so we see the first command, so it's going to give the process ID, and we use the process ID of 2, and the area is 0. Okay. Now notice what happened there. I think I had done a step through this earlier, and I must not have taken off some earlier configuration, because now if I end this and say show IPv6 OSPF neighbor, oh no, what I'm curious what just happened there. Okay, so go into interface loopback 0. And say IPv6 OSPF, process ID is 2, area 0. And do show show run section OSPF. Oh, I know what I did. Okay. Okay, yeah, I wanted to take a look at that. So actually it looks like it's a little easier. I could have used the begins. Okay, there is the IPv6 OSPF2 with the router ID, and then going back up to the interface, that's the serial 1/1, and under there we added the show IP OSPF2 area 0. Okay, so that's set there on router 3, I think because we're not going to run OSPF between router 3 and router 4. Show run begin OSPF. Okay. So we've got the IPv4 OSPFv2 and the serial 1/0, which is not participating. There's the router OSPF1 and the router ID. And here is our IPv6 router OSPF with a process ID of 2 and the router ID 3.3.3. Okay, so I think we're set on router 3, so we can jump over to router 2 now and go back into global configuration mode. And I'm going to say IPv6 router OSPF, and we'll use that same process ID 2, router ID 2.2.2.2. Now, even though the router ID has been set in the IPv4 configuration for OSPFv2, you have to set the router ID in the IPv6 process for OSPFv3. Okay, so there's the process, the router ID set and the process, and then we can just go back out and go into interface serial 1/1, and we say IP OSPF process ID 2 area 0. Perfect. There we go. Now you'll notice what happened here is something's still kind of going on, a little flaky with within the behind the scenes, because if I say show IP OSPF neighbor, okay, there's the IPv4 neighbor, show IPv6 OSPF neighbor, we still don't have the neighbor relationship.